a mother and father, already natural-born children of God. And we come here to be adopted as children of God. Now, I don't know if it seems strange to you, but have you ever asked yourself, why would natural parents adopt their children? Because that's what we're asserting is happening. You see, we have these two different types of divine parentage. And the reason is that being natural-born children is one kind of relationship, but choosing into a relationship of intimate fellowship, of deep abiding sharing of life, is a very different kind of relationship. It is a relationship that is chosen. And I would tell you that in LDS theology, the bottom line for almost everything is choice. When it comes right down to it, we're here to make a choice, and the choice is whether we will enter back into God's presence and enter into this kind of relationship, or we choose to walk away from it. That is the choice that's been given to us. In fact, I'd suggest to go back and read Alma 41 and 42 and what the atonement is about, because the atonement is all about giving us this very choice to be made. So what is it when we talk about having a different view of things and they say, we don't believe in deification the way you do? I respond, that's partly correct. You don't believe that when you become deified that you will share fully in God's knowledge and power and that you will have all that He is and has to give you. You believe that the only attribute that can be communicated to you is the attribute of immortal life. And we believe that that's given to everybody, that everybody naturally is resurrected and will live forever. That's not, and it's given to everybody as a sheer matter of grace. But to call people gods would seem strange to us. Rather, deification means for us having something that goes beyond grace. Now, I'm going to cleave the world again, if you will, but I want to first walk through this. I'm going to suggest to you that in the tradition there is no possible deification because of the assumption of metaphysical monotheism. Look at it this way. If God has the kind of essence that they say He does, that is, He is simple, and there's only one of that kind. And if this simple essence has no component parts in the sense that all of God's attributes are identical, and if God is essentially loving, and there's this term used in Orthodox theology, it's energies. Orthodox theologians assert that we share the energies of God, and in sharing the energies of God, we are deified. It's another way of saying that the divine life enters into us and keeps us alive forever, okay? But it happens that this energy is a part of the essence of God. And the essence of God happens to be part of what essentially it is to be uncreated. And because we are created, we can't share in this divine attribute either, because God can't share His essence with us. What God is essentially can't be shared with what humans are essentially. Now, I'd like you to back up. If that's true, and if people want to talk with us that way about what it is to be divine, I would ask this question. How can you possibly assert that your religion is based upon the most basic assertion that there is at the beginning a person who's both human and divine? Because you've arrived at the conclusion that humanity and divinity can't possibly be together in the same person. That was the argument you were using against me to suggest that my view of deification was not acceptable to you. And yet that's the very essence of Christianity and the very starting point for your religion. So you can't possibly deny it. We can't deny, you see, that there is a shared nature, such that what human nature is, we can possibly be divine. I would put it another way. For Jesus Christ to be fully human and fully divine entails that it cannot not be possible for human beings to be divine in nature. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Christ. It has to be that way. And so if that is the case, and it follows logically, it must be possible for human nature to fully possess the divine nature. Not only is it possible, we have an actual instance of it, Jesus Christ, who walked around the Palestinian countryside 2,000 years ago. Now, we've talked about the doctrine of the Trinity, and why the doctrine of the Trinity is in tension with this metaphysical monotheism. We've talked about Christology, and why the belief that Jesus is both God and man is in tension with metaphysical monotheism. We've talked about deification and why this doctrine is in tension with metaphysical monotheism. I now want to talk about the problem of free agency. This could also be called the problem of grace and works and salvation. Now, our critics will say, you don't believe in salvation in a right way. You're not truly Christian because salvation comes by grace. And obviously the next question, because of the way we've been trained by Dallin Oaks, is to ask the next question, what do you mean by salvation, right? So we're going to ask, well, what do you mean by salvation? Well, what I mean is I'm not going to be sent to hell, to which we can all gladly agree, you're right. None of us are going to be sent to hell. Let's move on. Because we don't believe in hell the same way they do. But if we look at it very carefully, there's something very profound and important here. If we are created ex nihilo, then it follows that everything about us in each moment is up to God. How so? Well, first of all, it follows from the notion of monarchical monotheism that there's only one being that has existence as its nature. That is, God can't fail to exist. But we can, and it's our nature such that if God doesn't sustain us in existence in each moment, we wink out of existence the next moment. What follows from that is that everything we are in every moment is created directly by God. How so? Well, imagine for a moment that I cease to exist for the next 5 minutes, and I just pop back into existence now, and 5 minutes have passed. How does God create me? I made a decision 3 minutes ago, and God, does He create me with that decision in place? Or does He create me as I was 5 minutes ago when I winked out of existence? You see, the state that I'm in now and the state that my choice is in now is totally up to God. Everything about me, including my free choices, are directly created by God if creation ex nihilo is true. Now, every thinker, every person in the whole history of thought who's thought about what free will is will agree that it's not consistent with external coercion. It's not consistent with being simply created as it is by something else. And yet that's directly what is asserted by the doctrine of creation ex nihilo. Therefore, if anything is done in the world, it must be directly done by God. Now, this is what philosophers would call occasionalism. In every single moment, everything that exists in the state that it exists in is created directly by God. And so, for instance, if I plant a tree 20 years ago and now it grows into a great oak, it hasn't grown into a great oak because I planted it as a tree. It's a great oak because God created it as a great oak in this moment. He could have created it as something totally different or not created it at all. There's no causal relationship between one moment and the next, and we have no causal power or efficacy. This follows, by the way, from creation ex nihilo. We have only one agent in the entire universe, and it's God. So if there's going to be salvation, there's only one agent who gets to determine who does it, and that's God. Now, I'll also tell you that I believe that the reading of Paul that's given by those who would suggest that God does our salvation essentially without us, read Ephesians and Romans much differently than I do, but that's a discussion for another day. The bottom line with this is let's talk about how we view life. It began with a story of a battle in a world before this one. And what was the battle over? You see, we believe in something very fundamental, so fundamental that we hardly ever assert it, but it really underlies the entire basis of our religion. Love is a free choice. Love that is worthy of the name must be freely chosen. And any person who truly loves another leaves that person free to choose whether to have that relationship or not. It can't be forced, it can't be coerced, and it can't be created. It has to be a full-hearted, full-blooded choice given with the whole soul. And that's what God is after in Mormon thought. And so there was an entire third of our brothers and sisters who chose not to move forward. And so it's as if we're saying, in the beginning, our Heavenly Father came to us and He said, look, I want to share with you everything that I have. I would like you to grow into everything that I am. But I can't do that unless you have certain kinds of experiences, and I leave you free to choose whether to have those experiences and choosing into relationship with me, because you see, you can't become what I am unless you freely choose to love me. But there's a risk here. If I leave you free as to whether you're going to have this relationship or not, you might choose not to have it. And if you choose not to have a relationship with me, that means darkness. That means being lost. That's a very serious thing. It's a real risk. Will you do it with me?